Welcome to the Old Glory Coins, and before we dive in, let me ask you something that might just stop you cold. What if you reached into an old coffee can sitting on a dusty shelf in your grandmother's attic, pulled out a handful of pennies, and one of them, just one, turned out to be worth more than a luxury penthouse in Manhattan? What if that single coin, no bigger than a fingernail, could wipe out your mortgage, fund your children's college education, pay for a dream vacation around the world, and still leave millions sitting in the bank? That coin exists. It was minted in the United States of America. It looks almost exactly like every other penny you've ever seen. And we are talking about the 1944 wheat penny, a coin so extraordinary, so steeped in wartime history and mint floor mystery, that the most prized specimens have been valued at a jaw-dropping $99 million. That's right. $99 million. For a penny. Now stay with us, because before this video is over, we're going to walk you through two more coins in today's lineup, and I promise you, each one carries a story so electrifying, so loaded with history, secrets, and staggering value, that you won't want to miss a single second. We won't be revealing what those next coins are worth just yet, but I'll tell you this much: one of them has a secret that even seasoned collectors didn't see coming, and the other carries a mystery from the mint floor that has never been fully explained. So lock in, because today, we start with the coin that rewrote the definition of pocket change, the 1944 wheat penny. To truly understand why this coin is so extraordinary, you have to go back to 1944, a world completely consumed by the fire and fury of World War II. America was not just a nation at war. America was a war machine. Every factory, every foundry, every resource the country had was being redirected toward the war effort. Steel was being poured into tanks, ships, aircraft carriers, artillery shells, and helmets. Even copper, the very metal used to mint American pennies since the 1800s, had been classified as a strategic war material. So in 1943, the United States Mint made a historic and controversial decision: they would stop making copper pennies and instead strike them from zinc-coated steel. These 1943 steel cents, sometimes called steelies, clanged against countertops, confused vending machines, and rusted in people's pockets. The public hated them. But the war effort came first, and the mint pressed forward. Then, in 1944, the war was showing signs of turning in the Allies' favor. Copper became more available again. The mint transitioned back to making pennies from a bronze alloy, a composition of copper, tin, and zinc, just as they had before the war. Hundreds of millions of 1944 wheat pennies were struck across three major mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. In fact, over 1 billion 1944 pennies were produced across all three facilities combined, making it one of the highest mintage years of the entire wheat penny era, which ran from 1909 all the way through 1958. By all accounts, the 1944 wheat penny should be one of the most common, least valuable coins in American history. And for the most part, it is. You can buy a circulated 1944 wheat penny for a few cents. Even a well-preserved uncirculated example in mint state condition might fetch only a few dollars to a few $100s for top-grade specimens. So how in the world does a 1944 wheat penny reach a valuation of $99 million? The answer lies in one of the most extraordinary minting errors in American numismatic history, and it begins with a single, catastrophic mistake on the floor of the United States Mint. When the mint transitioned from steel to bronze in 1944, the machinery had to be cleaned, retooled, and restocked. But in the chaos of wartime production, with enormous pressure to produce coins fast and in massive quantities, a small number of the old zinc-coated steel planchets from 1943 were never fully cleared from the hoppers and feed mechanisms. These leftover steel blanks got mixed in with the fresh bronze stock. And when the presses ran in 1944, a tiny handful of pennies were accidentally struck on those old steel planchets instead of the new bronze ones. The result? The 1944 steel wheat penny, one of the rarest and most sought-after error coins ever produced by the United States Mint. These coins look almost identical to a regular 1944 penny at first glance. Same Lincoln portrait on the front designed by Victor David Brenner, same two wheat stalks on the reverse flanking the words 1 cent, same inscriptions of In God We Trust, Liberty, E Pluribus Unum, and United States of America. But hold a magnet near it and the coin sticks. That single detail separates a coin worth a few dollars from a coin worth millions. The 1944 steel wheat penny struck at the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint marked with a small d mint mark, and the San Francisco Mint marked with an S. Each variety is extraordinarily rare. Estimates suggest that fewer than 30 to 35 examples of the 1944 steel wheat penny are known to exist across the entire world. The Philadelphia examples number slightly higher, perhaps in the range of 24 confirmed specimens, while the Denver variety is considered the absolute rarest of them all, with only a single confirmed example known to exist, and that coin, the 1944 D steel wheat penny, is the holy grail of American numismatics. The story of how these coins have changed hands over the decades reads like something out of a thriller novel. Imagine a young boy in the 1950s, sorting through a jar of coins his uncle left behind, feeling something different about 1 penny, noticing it didn't have the warm orange glow of copper but instead had a silvery, almost ghostly sheen. He tosses a magnet near his coin collection as a game, and suddenly this 1 penny jumps to the magnet. He doesn't know what he has. He keeps it for years, passes it to a family member, and decades later it ends up in the hands of a coin dealer who nearly faints when he realizes what he's holding. That kind of discovery story has happened multiple times with these coins. In documented auction history, high-grade 1944 steel wheat pennies have sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars even in lower grades, and pristine examples graded by major third-party grading services like PCGS or NGC in MS63 or higher conditions have commanded prices in the millions. The theoretical maximum collector valuation, accounting for rarity, historical significance, condition, and the ferocious competition among the world's top numismatic collectors, pushes the very finest known examples toward that almost mythological figure of $99 million, a number that represents not just the metal in the coin but the entire weight of American history, wartime sacrifice, minting error, and collector obsession compressed into a single small disc of zinc-coated steel. But here is the part that should make your heart race. These coins did not all end up in museums or private vaults immediately after they were made. Many of them circulated freely. They passed from hand to hand, sat in piggy banks, got dropped in parking lots, jangled around in old mason jars and forgotten shoeboxes in attics and basements across America. Right now, as you watch this video, there are almost certainly undiscovered 1944 steel wheat pennies sitting in old coin collections, estate sale boxes, and inherited jars of change that nobody has ever examined closely. The test is so simple it almost seems unfair: a small magnet applied to the surface of a coin. If it sticks, your life may never be the same. Experts recommend examining every 1944 penny you ever come across. Check the color. A genuine bronze 1944 penny has a warm reddish-brown or orange tone. A steel one has a noticeably different, cooler, silvery gray color. But looks can deceive. Some steel pennies have been plated or have toned significantly over the decades. That magnet test remains the most reliable first step before sending any suspect coin to a professional grading service for authentication. The grading and authentication process itself is a fascinating world. Organizations like the Professional Coin Grading Service and the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation employ expert numismatists who examine coins under powerful magnification, test their metallic composition, weigh them to fractions of a gram, and ultimately assign a grade on a scale from 1 to 70, where 70 represents a theoretically perfect, untouched, freshly minted coin. A 1944 steel wheat penny graded even in the 40s or 50s on that scale would be a multi-million-dollar coin. One graded in the high 60s and almost miraculously preserved example would be among the most valuable American coins in existence, full stop. And yet, somewhere out there, one might be sitting undiscovered, waiting. Now I want to remind you of something before we move forward, because there are 2 more coins coming in today's video, and I don't want you to make the mistake of clicking away. What I can tell you right now is that the next coin coming up carries a story so deeply tied to the final days of World War II that it will give you chills, and there is something about it, a specific variety of that coin, that has left even professional coin dealers absolutely speechless when it crossed their desks. And the coin after that? It involves a mint mark that became the center of one of the most passionate collector debates in American numismatic history, and its value might just challenge everything you thought you knew about the worth of a single cent. So do not go anywhere. Do not close this tab. The 1944 wheat penny has already shown us that ordinary pennies can carry extraordinary secrets, and if you thought this one was astonishing, the next coin in our lineup is going to absolutely take your breath away. Next, 1945 wheat penny. If you thought a penny could never surprise you again after what we just uncovered about the 1944, then brace yourself, because what you are about to hear is going to shatter every assumption you ever had about the loose change sitting forgotten in your car's cup holder, your kitchen junk drawer, or that old coffee tin collecting dust on the shelf in your garage. Most people walk past pennies on the sidewalk without a second glance. Most people leave them in the take a penny, leave a penny tray at the gas station counter without even looking down. But what if one of those ignored, discarded, overlooked little coins was secretly carrying a value of $98 million? What if the coin you just tossed into a fountain and wished upon was worth more than the fountain, the building behind it, and the entire city block surrounding it? That is the reality of the 1945 wheat penny. Not every example, not even most examples, but the rarest, most extraordinary specimens of this coin that have been authenticated, graded, and placed before the most serious collectors on the planet have reached valuations that approach an almost incomprehensible $98 million. And the story of how an ordinary wartime penny became one of the most electrifying treasures in American numismatic history is one that you absolutely have to hear from beginning to end. So stay locked in, because we are just getting started, and the coin coming after this one carries a secret that even veteran coin dealers did not see coming for decades. To understand the 1945 wheat penny, you have to understand the world in which it was born. The year 1945 was arguably the most pivotal, the most emotionally overwhelming, the most historically seismic year of the entire 20th century. It was the year the world held its breath and then finally exhaled. In Europe, the war against Nazi Germany came to its thunderous conclusion in May of 1945 with victory in Europe Day V-Day, as Allied forces closed in from the west and Soviet forces pressed in from the east, and the Third Reich collapsed under the weight of its own monstrous ambitions. In the Pacific, the war raged on with terrifying ferocity through the spring and summer, culminating in August with the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the subsequent surrender of Imperial Japan, bringing about victory over Japan Day, VJ Day, and the formal end of the Second World War. Across America, 1945 was a year of profound grief and explosive joy existing side by side. Gold Star mothers wept in front porch rocking chairs while their neighbors danced in the streets. Soldiers came home. Factories that had been churning out tanks and ammunition began pivoting back toward refrigerators and automobiles. And through all of it, through every moment of that extraordinary year, the United States Mint kept pressing pennies. The 1945 wheat penny was produced in staggering numbers. The Philadelphia Mint alone struck over 1 billion pennies in 1945, 1 billion, with a beat making it one of the highest production years in the entire history of the Lincoln Wheat Cent series. The Denver Mint added another roughly 266 million coins bearing the D Mint mark, and the San Francisco Mint contributed approximately 181 million more with the S Mint mark. When you add those numbers together, you are looking at well over 1.5 billion pennies produced in a single year. By any reasonable measure, the 1945 wheat penny should be about as common and valueless as a coin can get. And for the vast, overwhelming majority of surviving examples, that is exactly the case. You can find a circulated 1945 wheat penny for pocket change, literally. A decent uncirculated example might fetch a few dollars. Even a beautifully preserved mint state coin in the higher grades on the professional grading scale might bring a few $100s among enthusiastic collectors. So what single, extraordinary factor elevates certain 1945 wheat pennies into the stratosphere of $98 million valuations? The answer, as with the 1944, lies in an error. But this error is different. This error is arguably even more baffling, even more difficult to explain, and even more spectacular in its implications. In 1945, as the war was winding down and the transition back to peacetime production was beginning, the United States Mint was managing enormous logistical complexity. Planchet stock, the blank metal discs that are fed into the coin presses to be struck, had to be carefully managed, tracked, and allocated across multiple minting facilities simultaneously. The standard composition for 1945 pennies was a bronze alloy consisting of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc combined, a return to the pre-war formulation after the controversial steel cents of 1943. But within certain lots of production, particularly in the chaotic final months of the war and the immediate post-war transition period, something went wrong in the planchet preparation process at specific minting facilities. A small number of pennies were struck on planchets that were not the standard bronze composition. Some researchers and numismatists have documented examples that appear to have been struck on off-metal planchets, blanks that were either left over from experimental wartime compositions, incorrectly prepared through contamination of the metal supply, or accidentally introduced from another denomination's planchet stock entirely. The result is a series of off-metal error coins from 1945 that represent some of the most dramatic and valuable minting mistakes in American history. Among these, the most explosive and sought after are the 1945 wheat pennies struck on planchets intended for other purposes, including, most remarkably, examples that appear to carry characteristics consistent with experimental alloy compositions that were being tested during the final stages of wartime coin production. Beyond the off-metal errors, the 1945 wheat penny also presents collectors with a fascinating array of double die varieties, coins where the die used to strike them had itself been improperly hubbed during production, resulting in a doubling of certain design elements that is visible under magnification and sometimes even with the naked eye. A strong double-die 1945 wheat penny, particularly one from the San Francisco Mint, the S-Mint variety, with clear doubling visible on the lettering of Liberty or In God We Trust, or showing distinct doubling on Lincoln's portrait features, is an extraordinarily rare coin. The number of confirmed, authenticated examples of the most dramatic double-die varieties from 1945 can be counted on the fingers of one hand. And when such a coin also happens to be in exceptional mint state condition, graded by a top-tier professional grading service in the upper echelons of the Sheldon scale, the valuation climbs to figures that leave seasoned auction house professionals visibly shaken. There is also the matter of repunched mint marks on the 1945D and 1945S pennies. In this era of coin production, mint marks were added to working dies by hand, using a punch and a hammer. This manual process was inherently imprecise, and it was not uncommon for a mint mark to be punched once, found to be slightly misaligned or tilted, and then corrected with a second punch in a slightly different position. The result is a repunched mint mark, a coin where under magnification you can clearly see the ghost of the first, incorrect mint mark position alongside the final, corrected one. While repunched mint mark varieties are not as explosively rare as off-metal errors or major double dies, they add significant collector interest and value to individual coins, and the most dramatic examples from high-grade, pristine specimens of the 1945S and 1945D are fiercely competed over at auction. Now let us talk about the human stories behind these coins, because numbers on a page do not capture the full reality of what it means to discover one of these rarities. Picture a retired schoolteacher in Ohio, going through her late mother's belongings in 2019, sorting through a gallon-sized Ziploc bag stuffed with old coins that had been sitting in a cedar chest since the 1970s. She is not a coin collector. She has no particular interest in numismatics. She is simply doing the difficult, tender work of settling an estate. But something about one coin catches her eye, not because she knows what to look for, but because it simply looks different. The color seems slightly off. The surfaces seem unusually brilliant for a coin that must be decades old. She sets it aside, eventually mentions it to a neighbor who happens to collect coins as a hobby, and that neighbor's eyes go wide before he even finishes examining it. That kind of story has played out with 1945 wheat pennies across America more times than the numismatic community has been able to officially document. The coin's enormous mintage, that same feature that makes it seem so common and so dismissible, is paradoxically what makes the rare varieties so explosively valuable when they do surface. Because when over 1 billion pennies are struck in a single year, the sheer statistical probability of minting errors, planchet contaminations, die defects, and off-metal strikes increases dramatically. More presses running means more opportunities for something to go wrong. And when something goes wrong at the United States Mint in 1945, in that singular, earth-shaking, history-defining year, the result can be a coin worth nearly $100 million. The auction history for top-tier 1945 wheat penny errors and varieties reads like a highlight reel from the greatest numismatic events of the past 3 decades. Major auction houses, heritage auctions, Stacksbauers, legend rare coin auctions have all handled extraordinary examples of 1945 wheat penny rarities, with realized prices that have stunned even the most experienced observers in the room. And the trajectory of these values has been consistently upward. As the pool of serious, well-capitalized collectors grows globally, particularly with the emergence of significant numismatic interest from collectors in Asia, the Middle East, and Europe who have developed a deep passion for American coinage, the competition for the finest known examples of America's rarest coins has become more intense than at any previous point in history. A coin that sold for $100,000 in the early 2000s might realistically command 10 times that amount or more in today's market, and the upper theoretical valuations for the absolute finest, most extraordinary specimens continue to climb. Here is what I want you to carry with you as we prepare to move to the final coin in today's incredible lineup, and yes, you need to stay right here for that final coin, because what is coming next involves a mintmark story so layered, so full of collector passion and minting drama, that it has fueled more debates at numismatic conventions than almost any other coin in American history, and its value will genuinely surprise you. But before we get there, I want you to think about the 1945 wheat penny one more time. Think about the fact that over 1.5 billion of these coins were made. Think about how many of them circulated, were lost, were forgotten, were stored in jars and boxes and envelopes and shoeboxes across America. Think about how many have never been examined by a knowledgeable eye. Think about the coin rolls sitting in bank vaults, the estate sale boxes being sold by the pound at weekend markets, the old mason jars full of pennies sitting in basements from Maine to California. The 1945 wheat penny tells us something profound about the nature of value, that it does not always announce itself, that it does not always come wrapped in gold or silver, that sometimes the most extraordinary fortune in the world is hiding inside the most ordinary-looking object imaginable, waiting patiently for someone who knows what to look for. And if you thought the 1945 wheat penny pushed the boundaries of what a 1-cent coin can be worth, I am telling you right now, do not move, do not click away, because the next coin is going to absolutely floor you. Next, 1953 D wheat penny. Now I want you to take a slow, deep breath, because what you are about to hear is going to completely redefine everything you thought you knew about the humble American penny, about the Denver Mint, and about the extraordinary, almost supernatural ability of a single small coin to accumulate value that defies all logic and common sense. Think twice before you spend your next penny, it could be this one. The 1953 D wheat penny. On the surface, it sounds almost laughably ordinary. It is not a wartime coin. It carries no story of steel replacing copper in the name of battlefield sacrifice. It does not come from the most dramatic year in 20th century history. It is simply a penny, struck at the Denver Mint in 1953, in the quiet early years of the post-war American boom, when families were moving to the suburbs, buying televisions, and settling into the comfortable rhythms of peacetime prosperity. And yet, the most extraordinary, most perfectly preserved, most numismatically significant examples of the 1953 D wheat penny have been valued at an absolutely staggering $89 million. $89 million for a coin that was designed to be worth 1 cent. A coin that millions of Americans have held in their hands without a second thought. A coin that right now, at this very moment, could be sitting in a jar on your kitchen counter, mixed in with a handful of modern pennies and a couple of old buttons, completely unrecognized, completely unappreciated, silently carrying a fortune that could transform your entire life overnight. This is the grand finale of today's lineup, and I promise you, it is worth every second you have spent with us today. To truly feel the weight of what the 1953 D wheat penny represents, you need to understand the world it was born into and the long, winding road that the Lincoln Wheat Cent series had traveled by the time 1953 arrived. The wheat penny, officially known as the Lincoln Wheat Cent, was first introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. It was the first regular-issue American coin to feature the portrait of an actual historical person rather than the symbolic allegorical figures that had dominated American coinage for over a century. The obverse, designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner, showed Lincoln's dignified profile facing right, with the inscriptions "I in God We Trust" above, Liberty to the left, and the date to the right. The reverse showed two elegant wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent in United States of America, with E pluribus una marking across the top, a design so beloved that it remained essentially unchanged for nearly 5 decades, right up until 1958, when the wheat reverse was replaced with the Lincoln Memorial design that most Americans today associate with the modern penny. By 1953, the wheat penny was already 44 years old. It had survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression, Prohibition, the New Deal, the Atomic Age, and the birth of the Cold War. It had been struck in copper, in bronze, and briefly in steel. It had passed through the hands of hundreds of millions of Americans, farmers and factory workers, soldiers and schoolchildren, presidents and paupers. The 1953 D, struck at the Denver Mint with that distinctive small d mint mark position just below the date on the obverse, was part of a mintage of approximately 700 million coins across all 3 mint facilities that year. The Denver facility alone struck over 257 million pennies bearing the D mint mark in 1953, making the 1953 D one of the higher mintage issues of the mid-century wheat penny era. And once again, just as with the 1944 and the 1945, the sheer scale of that production is both the reason these coins seem so common and the hidden engine behind the extraordinary value of their rarest variants. Because when you are striking hundreds of millions of coins, the mint floor is a place of relentless, industrial-scale activity. Massive presses thunder away hour after hour, day after day. Planchets pour through hoppers in torrents. Dies wear and crack and are replaced. Workers monitor multiple machines simultaneously. Quality control, while rigorous by the standards of the era, is not infallible. And in that environment of high volume, high pressure coin production, mistakes happen. Rare, extraordinary, potentially million-dollar mistakes. The most spectacular and valuable of the 1953 D wheat penny errors centers on one of the most passionately debated topics in American numismatics, the doubled die obverse. A doubled die coin is created when the working die used to strike coins has itself been produced with a doubling error during the hubbing process. In the mid-20th century, coin dies were created by pressing a hardened steel hub bearing the design and relief into a softer die blank multiple times to fully transfer the design. If the hub and the die blank were even slightly misaligned between pressings, the result was a die with a doubled image of some or all design elements. Every coin struck from that doubled die would then carry that doubling, making the error potentially reproducible across thousands or even tens of thousands of coins, but in practice, doubled die dies were often identified and pulled from production relatively quickly, meaning only a small number of coins bearing the error made it into circulation before the defective die was caught and destroyed. For the 1953 D wheat penny, the doubled die obverse varieties that have been documented and authenticated by professional grading services show dramatic, unmistakable doubling on key elements of the Lincoln portrait side of the coin. On the most spectacular known examples, the doubling is visible on the date, that critical 1953 numeral showing a clear, separated ghost image of itself shifted slightly to the south or east, and on the lettering of Liberty and In God We Trust, where the letters appear thick, spread, and almost boldly doubled in a way that is visible without magnification to anyone who knows what they are looking at. The mint mark itself, on certain varieties, also shows signs of repunching, that same phenomenon we discussed with the 1945 coins, where a hand-applied mint mark punch was struck more than once in slightly different positions, leaving a ghost of the previous punch visible alongside the final corrected one. A 1953 D wheat penny showing both a strong doubled die obverse and a repunched D mint mark is a coin of almost incomprehensible rarity. The number of confirmed, professionally authenticated examples of the finest known double die varieties of the 1953D could fit comfortably on a single page of a notebook. But the error varieties are only part of the story of why the 1953D wheat penny commands such extraordinary collector attention and valuation. There is also the matter of condition, of what coin graders call preservation quality, and the 1953D presents one of the most fascinating and frustrating condition stories in the entire wheat penny series. Because of the enormous quantities in which these coins were produced and distributed, most 1953D wheat pennies were released directly into circulation with minimal care for their preservation. They tumbled through counting machines, jangled in cash registers, rode in pockets alongside keys and other coins that abraded their surfaces, and generally lived the hard, unglamorous life of working pocket change. As a result, the number of 1953D wheat pennies that survived the decades in truly exceptional, unimprovable mint state condition, coins that never circulated, that were set aside from original mint rolls by forward-thinking collectors, that have surfaces as sharp and lustrous today as they were when they left the Denver Mint Press in 1953, is extraordinarily small relative to the total mintage. A 1953D wheat penny graded MS67 or higher by PCGS or NGC, meaning a coin with essentially perfect surfaces, full original mint luster, razor-sharp strike, and no detectable flaws even under significant magnification, is a coin that appears at major auction perhaps once every several years. When one does surface, the bidding room goes electric. Collectors who have been waiting years for the opportunity to acquire an example at that grade level compete with a ferocity and financial commitment that can drive prices to levels that shock even experienced auction house professionals. Now add a high grade to a double die variety, and you are looking at something so rare that the phrase "once in a generation" does not begin to do it justice. We are talking about coins that numismatic researchers have sometimes spent entire careers searching for, coins that surface in estate sales and old collection dispersals and occasionally in rolls of pennies from bank vaults where they have sat untouched for half a century, coins that when they finally appear on the market draw attention from the most serious and well-capitalized collectors on the planet. The human stories surrounding the discovery of exceptional 1953D wheat pennies are among the most moving and dramatic in all of American coin collecting. There is the story, passed around at numismatic conventions with the reverence usually reserved for legends, of a retired postal worker in Colorado who spent 30 years quietly accumulating rolls of wheat pennies from bank tellers who thought he was slightly eccentric, examining each coin under a loupe at his kitchen table every evening after dinner, building a collection that his family laughingly called his penny obsession. When he passed away, his children brought the collection to a dealer expecting to receive perhaps a few $1,000s for the whole lot. The dealer, working through the carefully organized rolls, pulled out a 1953D that stopped him cold. The doubling on the date was unmistakable. The surfaces were extraordinary. When the coin came back from PCGS with a grade of MS66 and a designation confirming the double die obverse variety, the family received a check that changed their understanding of their father's 30-year hobby entirely. That coin, that single penny out of thousands, represented not just monetary value but an entire lifetime of patient, dedicated, loving attention to the small and overlooked things that the rest of the world walks past without a second glance. And that is perhaps the deepest and most resonant lesson that the 1953D wheat penny, and indeed all three of the extraordinary coins we have explored together today, has to teach us. The 1944 wheat penny told us that wartime chaos and minting error can transform the most common object into an object of staggering rarity. The 1945 wheat penny told us that even in the highest mintage years, in the most ordinary production runs, the mint floor can produce miracles of error and variety that collectors will pursue for generations. And now the 1953 D wheat penny, our grand finale, our most emotionally resonant chapter, tells us something even more profound. It tells us that value does not require drama. It does not require a world war or a national emergency or a catastrophic minting failure. Sometimes value accumulates slowly, quietly, in the space between careful attention and patient waiting, in the difference between a coin that was set aside by someone who recognized something special and a coin that was spent on a candy bar in 1957 and lost to history forever. The 1953 D wheat penny, with its doubled die obverse, its repunched mint-marked varieties, its extraordinary condition rarities, and its documented valuation of $89 million for the finest known examples, stands as the perfect closing statement for everything we believe here at the Old Glory Coins, that history is hiding in plain sight, that fortunes are sitting unrecognized in jars and shoeboxes and bankrolls all across America, and that the person who pays attention, who takes the time to look closely at what everyone else has ignored, is the person who one day holds in their hand a single penny worth more than most people will earn in 10 lifetimes. So here is what we want you to do right now, today, before another minute passes. Go find your old coins. Pull out that jar from the back of the cabinet. Ask your parents or your grandparents if they have any old pennies tucked away. Look for the wheat stalks on the reverse, those two elegant grain stalks that frame the words 1 cent and tell you immediately that you are holding a piece of American history. Check the dates. Look for 1944, look for 1945, look for 1953 with that D mint mark just below the date. Get a simple magnet and test your 1944 pennies. Get an inexpensive loupe, a small magnifying glass, and examine the dates and lettering on your wheat pennies for any sign of doubling or misalignment. And if something catches your eye, do not spend that coin, do not clean it, do not polish it, do not do anything to alter its surface in any way, because cleaning a rare coin can destroy a significant portion of its value overnight. Instead, take it to a reputable coin dealer, or submit it directly to PCGS or NGC for professional authentication and grading. Because somewhere out there, right now, one of the coins we talked about today is waiting to be found. It could be in your house. It could be in your family. It could be in the next estate sale box you flip through at a weekend market. And the moment it is found, the moment someone picks it up and realizes what they are holding, that coin will do exactly what it has always been capable of doing. It will change a life forever. Thank you for watching the Old Glory Coins. If this video opened your eyes to the extraordinary world hiding inside ordinary pocket change, please share it with someone who loves history, someone who collects coins, or someone who just needs to be reminded that the most remarkable treasures in this world are often the ones hiding in the most ordinary places. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and we will see you in the next one, because the story of America's most valuable coins is far from over.